is Ouagadougou, a city teeming with 3/4 million people in dusty streets, pitifully poor housing, and huge deficiencies in basic services such as streets, sewer, water, and education.
It is the capital of Burkina Faso, which until 1984 was known as Upper Volta. This nation is a former French colony in West Central Africa. In the rural areas, its 9 million inhabitants live in abject poverty at best, with an average per capita income of only $100, and the Sahara Desert moving southward into the nation at an ever-increasing rate.
To meet these overwhelming problems against seemingly insurmountable odds, government and private agencies from around the world are providing aid to Burkina Faso.
A significant relationship has developed between the university here, the University of Ouagadougou, and the University of Georgia. In fact, some 20 top officials of the university and the Burkina government have attended the University of Georgia in Athens. I'm Steve Bell.
And I'm Tom Jackson. We're here to accompany a group of UGA experts in fields such as agriculture, nutrition, health, and international development as they study ways to address the problems facing this desperately impoverished nation.
You can't help but be moved by the scenes you are about to see as we tour Burkina Faso, a nation facing challenges generations away from solutions, with Georgians determined to bring those solutions to reality.
Burkina Faso is a nation in West Africa, just south of the Sahara Desert, in an area known as the Sahel. It is about the same size as the state of Colorado. To Jean Bigbalo Ouedraogo, this land is home.
When I was young, there were no problem here to grow millet, to grow food, and to prepare food. But now there are more and more problems to grow millet. Hey, the challenge is big, but we have no technology to change the drought. You have to manage with it. We have no technology to make the rain come more. But the short rain season, we have to manage with it. It is a big challenge.
Jean Ouedraogo is known as Big Jean to his friends. He tells us how lion once roamed these plains where he grew up in the 1940s and 50s. He remembers how the landscape, once lush and green, became dry, dusty, and foreboding as the drought and the desert moved relentlessly southward over recent decades. The lion, he says, moved when the drought came. By instinct, they followed the fragile supply of water south. But for the people, this is home. The people have stayed to fight the drought and maintain their ancestral homes. Now they struggle daily to scratch an existence out of the barren soil.
From where I am from the north, this year was really a bad year, so we didn't have enough food. And
Dr. Idrissa Dicko is an entomologist at the University of Ouagadougou. He is one of more than 20 native Burkinabe who have studied in the United States, many at the University of Georgia, in order to learn better how to help their native land.
It's not really as bad as it is in Ethiopia, really, as far as food is concerned, but some people do need food.
Professor Dicko is one of the people Big Jean Ouedraogo has made it his business to get to know as a civic leader in his native village of Boussay. He knows people like Professor Dicko can help his people deal with the drought and the many other problems they face. Big Jean left his village at the age of 15 to study and work in the capital city, Ouagadougou. He came in contact with Burkinabe at the University of Ouagadougou, who had been to America to study at the University of Georgia. And he learned English, because that way he could talk to Darrell Snyder. Dr. Snyder is the Associate Vice President for Services at the University of Georgia. Since 1977, he has been the driving force behind an international development agreement involving the two universities, a cooperative effort that has resulted in a most fruitful exchange of expertise, technology, and most of all, people.
The relationship here is a relationship that's been built over time. It's a relationship built in depth. It's a relationship built on trust. It's a relationship built on caring. And it seems to me that all of those aspects are important to any kind of a relationship that the University of Georgia and its faculty and administrators have, regardless of where we choose to go in the world to try to provide assistance.
This is Dr. Snyder's 14th visit to Burkina Faso. He has seen the many challenges facing this impoverished land, the world's 5th poorest country. Disease such as river blindness and guinea worm. An infant mortality rate horrifically high. 14% died before their first birthday. Illiteracy, only 26% of children attend school, and less than 2% make it to college.
One can never, I don't think, see things of that nature and not be touched, because it's a brother, it's a sister, it's a human being, and those human beings have the same kinds of feelings and emotions that we do in the United States.
Against this canvas of poverty and climatological stress, the International Development Agreement has resulted in this group of native Burkinabe, who are now University of Georgia graduates. They have returned home to take up the struggle against seemingly insurmountable odds to bring a better quality of life for the millions of people living here. It is a battle whose outcome will not be seen in their lifetimes and may not be known for generations to come. At least 20 UGA faculty members representing a wide range of fields of expertise have visited Burkina Faso over the past 14 years to learn, to share their insight, and to identify future areas for research and cooperation between the two universities. Big Jean Ouedraogo is guide for Dr. Snyder and this delegation of UGA experts. They include Dr. Ann Peischer, an assistant professor of home economics, who specializes in nutrition.
It's hard to see this much need and to realize how inadequate you are to meet it. Because there are not too many things that we as Americans face that we don't think that we can fix sooner or later. And there are not too many things here that are fixable real quick.
Cattle get sperm production.
Dr. Terry Kaiser is a professor of animal science at the University of Georgia.
But I think the thing that I see that has been a major problem here is that a lot of the programs that we bring in are not sustainable. When we leave, the program goes. And I think that in the future, we've got to make sure that whatever kind of program we bring in, that when we leave, the people here have to be able to carry on those programs.
Yeah, throw away the children.
Another UGA expert on this particular exchange visit is Dr. Susan Jenkins, a rural sociologist in the university's College of Agriculture.
We've come face to face that we all are brothers and sisters in the whole world.
I'm Louis Boyd.
Dr. Louis Boyd is Director of International Development for the University of Georgia College of Agriculture.
We have got to work together with these people. They're interested. They know what they need to do. We just got to help them do it. We can't not do it for them, or no one else can do it for them.
Although Burkina Faso is poor, its economy is among the best managed of the former French colonies of West Africa. The government, although a military dictatorship, is among the most stable and generally has not interfered with international efforts at assistance. Within this landlocked nation, we find stark contrasts. The capital city of Ouagadougou teems with some 750,000 people. An hour's ride to the north brings you to a land of grass-roofed mud huts and bare-breasted women, where ancient native customs prevail. In the extreme north are the southern fringes of the Sahara Desert, where the population is sparse, consisting only of nomadic tribes.
The pace of life is brisk in Ouagadougou. The motor scooter is the vehicle of choice. Only the wealthiest own cars. Bicycles also are common, and the poorest of the poor must walk wherever they go. Poverty, abject poverty, is evident all around. In the city, ramshackle dwellings house hundreds of thousands of people, many of whom face hunger and illness with no prospects for productive employment. Many people have left the rural areas in hope of finding a job in the city, but none awaits them. For some, the only means of support may be selling items to visitors on a street. A child leads an elderly man, possibly her grandfather, by a stick. He was stricken years ago by the dread river blindness caused by a waterborne parasite, and still painfully common in third world countries.
In the rural reaches to the north, in the sub-Sahara region known as the Sahel, existence is year to year, harvest to harvest, even rainfall to rainfall. Those come fewer and farther between each year. Because of atmospheric wind changes, the Sahara Desert creeps southward into Burkina Faso at the rate of more than 20 miles each year in a process called desertification. This weather pattern has prevailed for the last 20 years. Each mile the desert moves south means increasing dryness and less land able to support vegetation. But the people of Burkina Faso remain a vibrant, friendly, outgoing population. They face this mounting struggle against the forces of nature with a resolve tempered by thousands of years of survival as a people.
This day finds our University of Georgia group traveling the only paved highway leading northward from the capital to the village or department of Boussay. En route, we are amazed to see the stately babao trees, which look to us like they have been plucked from the earth by some giant and plunged back in upside down. Equally amazing are the termite hills, such as this one, as tall as a man. Boussay is a collective name for a larger community of villages in close proximity to each other. We stop at one of the villages to visit a school. This is the school in the village of Nambre Bago. About 175 students going to school 6 days a week, learning French, reading and writing, math, science. But they're the unusual ones. In this nation, only 27% of the school-age children are actually in school. That's despite the fact that school attendance is compulsory in Burkina Faso. This school has 3 classrooms with about 60 students each, taught by 3 teachers. The 2 teachers and the headmaster gladly take time out from their work to greet these unannounced American visitors. Less than 1% of these students will make it to college.
We realize early on that children are children all over the world. They're shy around adults and can be quite prim and proper. But on the playground, they're full of life and excitement, all wanting to be in front of the television camera. But for these Burkinabe children, there are stark differences as well. Scars mark a child's face, signs that the ancient ritual of inflicting tribal markings has not ended, even near the end of the 20th century. Here, traditional educational resources, pencils, paper, chalk, are rare luxuries to be prized. The textbook for this class is a tattered 1974 book printed by UNICEF. Few funds exist to purchase new books. Improving the schools of Burkina is the responsibility of this man. Dr. Moussine Nakro is the Minister of Secondary and Higher Education and Scientific Research for Burkina Faso. He spent 2 years at the University of Georgia as a research associate in biochemistry.
If you take in Burkina 140 kids in age to go to school, only 37 of them would be able to attend schools at the primary level. From those 37, only 4 of them would be able to reach secondary school.
And then only
4 of them would reach secondary school, as I mentioned. 3 of them would be able to make it to the top, and only 1 of them would be eligible for a university education.
Today, Moussine Nakro presides over the secondary and higher educational system of his homeland, charting a path for future development.
Teachers are important people, especially in rural areas, because the teacher would bring, of course, knowledge for the kids, but they would also sometimes come with them very important elements such like health education, nutrition education, and so those things are very well viewed in teachers.
Nakro knows that for his country to develop and become self-sustaining, the population must be educated. And the key to successful educational programming rests with the government's ability to develop its own educational materials.
For the primary education level and the secondary level, the best way to address that question would be to develop books production locally.
Shortages of books and paper pervade the educational system in Burkina at all levels. From the elementary schools to classrooms at the University of Ouagadougou, there aren't enough materials to accommodate the need. Many of the books in the Institute of Rural Development Library have been donated by the faculty and staff of the University of Georgia. An effort remains underway to ship hundreds more to Burkina Faso to better equip University of Ouagadougou library facilities. Ali Ouedraogo did physics research at the University of Georgia. He now teaches at the University of Ouagadougou. It's difficult, he says, to teach even rudimentary topics when the resources needed for basic experiments aren't available.
You know, students, they really cannot touch the reality, because you can talk about electricity and optics, but if you cannot have an experiment, it is really difficult to find out the goal and the theory. Even though we don't have a lot of labs, what we are trying to do is to have some application in our life.
Children who attend the Nabrabago school are assured one nutritious meal a day. But lunchtime here is quite different from that of an American school. Each student has his own food bowl. They're lined up neatly outside the schoolrooms on the dusty concrete walkway. In a land where food can be scarce, these sacks provide the basis for the student's meal. Grains provided by American assistance programs through U.S. Catholic Relief Services account for most school lunches in Burkina Faso. It is one of the most successful programs coordinated in this country by the U.S. Agency for International Development.
One, you address the immediate nutritional needs of primary-age kids. And secondly, by making food available to kids in school, you encourage attendance in the school system. In our program, we are feeding on the order of 344,000 students on a daily basis during the school year. That's roughly half of the primary-age population in this country.
Each day, the grain is measured into bowls and carried to an outside kitchen for preparation. Cooking is done in a small building behind the school. Students pitch in by carrying mixing bowls and firewood. When the meal is ready, the children will bring their bowls to receive a helping of bean and meal stew for lunch. For some, it might be the only substantive meal they eat each day.
A young teacher invites us to visit her home near the school. In Burkina Faso, villages desiring a teacher build her a home, often the nicest home in the village, to help the government attract a qualified teacher to the village. The government doesn't have funds to build schools in each village, so the inhabitants usually construct the schools as well. This teacher's home is relatively modern for Burkina Faso. It's made of dried bricks. Inside, there are no soft mattresses for sleeping. People sleep on woven grass mats. Bowls for food preparation sit nearby on the dusty floor. In the back of the house, we find a baby crib, one of the few Spartan furnishings in the three-room house. There are no screens on the windows to offer protection from the hot winds and insects of rural Burkina Faso. Only metal louvers that could be closed on occasion.
Outside, a relative proudly shows us her new cook stove. Most in rural Burkina Faso cook over open fires between two large stones, a practice that uses a great deal of firewood, a commodity which is precious in this dry land. Children will often spend every hour they're not in school gathering firewood. It is against the law to cut any live wood. Only dead limbs may be picked up, an effort to control the massive deforestation that has struck this land as the desert moves southward. That's why this new stove is so special to the teacher's family. The sides on the bottom help concentrate the heat and reduce the amount of firewood needed for cooking. In a nearby section of Nabrabago, we see this tree project, a community effort to grow wood as a crop for fuel. The program is struggling due to the ever-deepening drought, but it is a start.
Peach. Back at the school, we exchange gifts with our gracious hosts. We present the school with a scrapbook made by students at Oconee County Elementary School in Watkinsville, Georgia, complete with photos of a typical day in the life of an American school student. The teachers expressed surprise at seeing photos of black teachers and students in an American school. They had been led to believe that did not happen. And our translator, Big John, was unable to come up with an acceptable translation for the word pizza. It was something we simply could not explain. In return, we received the gift of 2 live chickens. Dr. Snyder expressed his delight with the gift, which of course he dared not refuse for fear of offending our hosts.
Yes, French. Okay.
The chief of Nabrabago had ridden up on his bicycle, and upon discovering the identity of the visitors, he enthusiastically invites us to visit his village's new grain storage facility nearby.
Grain storage facilities such as this are rare in Burkina. It allows the village to store grain for the dry season when crops can't be grown. It also affords the village an opportunity to sell some of the grain to other villages during drought.
With sorghum at a cost that they can better afford than if they sold the surplus in the fall and then had to buy it back at the beginning of the rainy season at a highly inflated price. Yes, so when they sell the surplus in the fall, the price is low. But when they need the extra grain for their food in the early summer, the price is inflated. And this is insurance against that.
Constructed with a loan from Catholic Relief Services, the grain storage facility and its small diesel-driven grain mill could mean survival in times of drought. To date, the village is current on repayment of the loan, evidence of the villagers' desire to help themselves, building a better quality of life in the long term. Just up the road is the central administration building for the village of Bousset, the mayor's office, so to speak. A plaque commemorates the fact that Bousset is the sister city of Decatur, Georgia. It was presented by the mayor of Decatur during a visit several years ago. The Decatur Sister Cities program remains active in providing tangible aid to Bousset.
We learned early on that this is the stuff of life in Burkina Faso, water. It also can be the stuff of serious illness or death. A safe well such as this one is a new luxury in rural parts of this country, where for generations the people depended on what little surface water could be found, water full of disease. This ritual is performed daily by the women of the village, walking sometimes several miles to a clean well, and filling their water containers is a necessity for survival. This woman displays the effects of guinea worm, a debilitating disease common in developing nations.
Until these wells were provided, the people had to get their water from these ponds, in some cases stagnant ponds or reservoirs of water. When they would step into the water to get their containers filled with water, these guinea worm that were emerging from the legs principally would deposit larvae in the water. And those larvae then would be ingested by or get into water fleas. And water fleas then would be picked up in the containers and would be ingested by the people when they were drinking the water. And then the larvae that were in those water fleas would get out of the water flea into the body, get into the system, and would grow into worms. And the worms would mate in the system, inside the body. And the males would die and would be absorbed by the body. The females would mature and would then deposit larvae in the water, you see. So it's a cycle, but there is an intermediate host. If you break a cycle of that nature by eliminating any one of those phases of the development of the parasite, it can be very easily eliminated.
But even where deep wells are provided, the Burkinabe have not always used the wells immediately. They are people of tradition, traditions not easily broken. Only when villagers noted people using water from the new deep wells did not become ill, sometimes over a period of several wet and dry seasons, did they change their habits and begin widespread use of the wells.
In some of these villages, they found that by having cleaner water, that they're able to reduce the amount of the measles. And they're seeing their babies not have the diarrhea. And so as soon as they see that, then that village is willing to go ahead and help.
But in the main village of Bousset, we are pleased to see a large well that obviously has caught on with the villagers. This facility was built with funds provided by the United Methodist Church. And on this hot, dusty day, it's a particularly popular place to be. About a mile away is another well, which village women use to obtain clean water for washing clothes. The colorful garments must be carried to the well. Here, water is drawn, clothes scrubbed and rinsed in wash pots, and then laid out on bushes to dry. A much more time-consuming task than most Americans would allow for such a chore.
Several years ago, the government of Burkina Faso instituted a widespread health improvement program in which dispensaries like this were built in each village. Staffed with limited resources, the facilities were a governmental attempt to improve the health of the Burkinabe. But as with the wells, the dispensaries weren't used by the people. They preferred the traditional native medicines and cures. So across the nation, 7,000 buildings like this sit vacant, a strange monument to the government's desire for an improved quality of life, an indication that aid programs must be soundly based in the local culture in order to be effective.
When we saw the dispensaries, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that perhaps that was imposed by perhaps our society or a European society, that it is important to have a dispensary in an area. That may not be important in this culture, but so what we have to do is go in and live with the villagers and find out what we can do to help them as far as having their children live a little bit longer. And then if they can see those results, then they will continue that.
Bousset is the exception to the rule in Burkina Faso. It is one of a few villages with a higher standard of living, largely because of the leadership of Jean Ouedraogo and the desire of the villagers to better themselves. Bousset has its own medical facility staffed with a full-time nurse. Selected by vote of the village, this nurse attended school in Ouagadougou and now provides first aid and health education to the villagers.
How is she paid? By the village or by the government?
It's the government pays.
And the government pays.
Yes, the government pays.
But the nurse says with little money available for purchasing medical supplies, frequently there is little real assistance she can offer. This is the town dispensary here in Bousset. The nurse tells us people don't come here for preventative medicine because they can't afford it. They only come here after they're seriously ill. Inside the health center, the surroundings are anything but sterile. Cleanliness is difficult to achieve in an environment as hostile as Burkina Faso. There are few financial or other resources with which to maintain a medical facility. Consequently, what few medical supplies are obtained, such as this IV unit, are being reused, an extremely dangerous medical practice which increases the chance of spreading AIDS, already rampant in Burkina, hepatitis, and other diseases.
They're sterilizing their equipment, their syringes, and their needles by putting it in an alcohol solution.
There is barely enough alcohol to cover the needles. A container for malaria medicine is empty. There is no money to buy more.
Just a few short steps away from the clinic is the emergency room facility. Here in Bousset, if a villager is severely injured, they are brought here immediately for treatment. And inside, the conditions are deplorable at best. While these facilities are better than most Burkinabe villages have, it is difficult for us to accept.
This area is the emergency room, and when people are wounded or have a problem, this is where they come. And obviously you can see that the facilities are very limited. For example, we have flies and other things on the equipment, and there's no area there that they can keep clean. I would think that this is probably iodine. Intruders.
Yes.
I get sick.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is not fair. Somehow we don't have our priorities right. We can't allow people to have the basics.
We have no large income to buy medicine, and we have to go back to take with traditional medicine, to take the knowledge of the traditional medicine and to enhance the level of the sanitary sanitation.
Mosquito-borne diseases such as malaria are an ever-present concern for residents and visitors alike.
This is the village maternity ward. It is an improvement over nothing, with beds donated by the city of Decatur, Georgia, and with midwifery and nursing care available despite lack of medical supplies. Animals wander in and out at the open door. Windows without cover allow dust to blow through. On this particular day, the outside temperature is 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is much hotter inside. Infant mortality in Burkina Faso is extremely high. 14 of every 100 die before age 1. Of every 100 surviving the first year, another 12 will die before age 5. Even to those of us untrained in medicine, it is painfully obvious that several of these infants, perhaps 4 of the 8 here today, have little chance of survival. In Burkina Faso, women have few rights. Big Jean Ouedraogo and these village women discuss for our information love and marriage relationships within their society. In many instances, the marriages are arranged by the girl's parents, or the women are presented to men as a gift of appreciation. This was the case with Ouedraogo's second wife, because of his long and diligent work at improving living conditions in his village.
I have received a gift, and the gift is a woman. If you are appreciated in the village, they give you a woman, a girl, to marry. And if they give you a girl to marry, she's obliged to marry you. And most of the women are given.
Most of the women?
Yes, in the village are given.
Okay.
Burkina custom dictates men have 2, 3, or more wives. Each wife will have 4 or 5 children in a lifetime.
We come upon the village market in Boussay. On certain days of the week, villagers gather to sell their foodstuffs and their wares. We see all sorts of grains, baked goods, and hardware for sale. The price is strictly negotiable.
Then what's up? Oh, yeah.
Unlike in the village market, every day is market day in the city, but bartering is routine even in the largest of markets.
Combien? 150. 150?
Welcome to Le Grand Marché. This is the version of an American shopping mall where you find everything from food to clothing, cooking utensils, and just about everything in between. Built recently as part of a government urban renewal project, the multi-storied concrete structure houses numerous small shops. For the merchant, it is an expensive proposition available only to those with a large amount of capital by Burkina standards.
To even get a place here in the market, you'd have to have a lot of money. You know, it costs a lot, and my own mother has a place up there. I don't know if she's here today, but she pays something like 20,000 local francs a month just to be here.
That's 72 American dollars a month in a country where the average per capita income is less than $200 per year. But the merchants here have a supermarket of wares, intricate craft items, shoes made out of recycled vehicle tires, elaborate cloth imported from China or Korea, fruits, dried fish, and meats sold without refrigeration, open to air, dust, and insects. In this rack of cassette tapes, we recognized only one artist. Yes, Milli Vanilli made their mark in Burkina Faso, too. And a truly Georgian product, Coca-Cola, can be had here also, although usually hot and with a twist of lemon. Each morning, the streets of Ouagadougou are filled with women heading to the Grand Marché to buy their vegetables and meats for the day's meals. Since there is little or no refrigeration at home, they buy only what they need for today. And even here, in the most prosperous symbol this nation has, there are signs of abject poverty, a crippled child, a beggar, those inflicted with disease. So he makes his way.
The market is one of several large construction projects which are apparent in Ouagadougou. While we are told many of them are financed with government assistance, the National Chamber of Commerce encourages private entrepreneurs as well.
This is a kind of indication of renovation of the business in Burkina. For mainly tourism, business people have been invited by the government to find a way to renovate their trade. So we have been seeing since 3 years a lot of constructions. I think this movement will continue. You know, it has a kind of multiplicative effect.
Shortage of construction equipment leads to unusual scenes, such as this, loading concrete and dirt up a construction scaffold, rather than having it lifted by cranes. And more than just physical construction facilities are lacking. There are problems with basic infrastructure.
It's not so easy. You know, our geographical position is a little difficult. We don't have sea, and some facilities like electricity, like transportation, are not easy to get for businessmen.
In villages such as Boussay, the construction is much simpler. These men are building a new nutrition education center for the village. Construction paid for with a gift of $40,000 from a Georgia family. When completed, it will be staffed with an educator to provide information on improving the health care and diet of children and mothers. The willingness of the Burkinabe to do such work themselves with materials supplied by relief agencies is a strength, says U.S. Ambassador David Shen.
The biggest program in Africa is in Burkina, the biggest self-help program. The reason it's the biggest is because, in my view, it's the most successful program in Africa. The reason it's the most successful is that Burkina is ideally adapted for self-help. The people at the village level will go out and get their hands dirty and do the work themselves. There are other countries on this continent where I've been at where they wouldn't think of touching one of those dirty bricks or putting a roof up. They want someone to come out and do it all for them.
Together with education, better nutrition is a major weapon in the effort to develop a healthy populace and a self-sustaining economy. Solving these problems is where native Burkinabe, who are University of Georgia graduates, apply their education in search of answers that will help accommodate the needs we so graphically have seen. The focal point of the Georgia-Burkina connection is the University of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's only institution of higher education. Ame Nianogo recently was appointed head of animal research for the country under the ministry headed by Moussine Nakro, the education secretary whom we met earlier. Nianogo oversees animal research programs for the entire nation. He received his Ph.D. in animal nutrition from UGA and now searches for ways of feeding his people more efficiently. it is a task of monumental proportions.
How big a challenge? It's a challenge bigger than my life or that of my kids or something. It's something like that. I think we'll all have to go for it, but I also know that it's going to be a lot of work for a lot of years.
On campus, we meet in a room filled with faculty members in varying capacities at the University of Ouagadougou. Many have participated in international exchange programs or worked closely with UGA researchers on collaborative research projects.
Many carry on research at the Agricultural Experiment Station at Gampela, on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, a facility established under the Georgia-Burkina Cooperative Agreement. Here, Aimé Nianogo and other scientists do agricultural research they hope will benefit their nation. But carrying out crop research is difficult in a land where the growing season is short, just a few weeks during the 3-month rainy season.
And how much rainfall comes during that time? Can you tell us in inches?
Yeah, around 25 inches. 25 inches.
But you can't store any of that water any place. You have no storage facilities, a lake or a dam or anything of that sort.
No, we don't have any facility to store water.
Do you have any plans for developing that?
There is some plan, but I think right now you do not have funding to build a dam to store water.
If you had that, you could actually grow crops almost year-round then, if you had the water supply.
Yeah.
6 months out of the year, this area would be a lake, be covered with water 10 to 12 feet deep. But this is March, and it's hot, and it's dry, and the lake bed is cracked. The hard ground makes cultivation virtually impossible except during the wet season of the year. Rains normally fall from the end of May to the 1st of September. During this time, the nation must produce enough food to sustain itself through the remainder of the year. And should those rains not fall, no matter the reason, Burkina Faso's people face massive food and water shortages with little hope of government aid. The wind and dry conditions make vegetable production difficult as well, requiring some ingenuity. Here, corn has been planted, but not as a source of food. The taller corn plants stand as a windbreak, protecting the other, shorter vegetable plants in this experiment station research plot from the continually howling winds of Burkina Faso. Without the corn, wind-driven sand would slice the vegetable plants to shreds. And following the old maxim, when given lemons make lemonade, the researchers at Gampela are working to harness the brutal Sahel sun, using solar panels supplied by the French to drive well pumps to irrigate the crops.
Getting more protein into the diet of the Burkinabe is a necessity. Feed for animals is a primary concern here, since little substantive grazing is available. Consequently, making feed supplies go further is mandated.
There's a lot of sorghum stovers produced in this country. You know that sorghum is the most important crop here. And so we have a lot of residues, and to get the animals to really benefit from it and eat it, what we have to do is then first chop it, then add some urea and some water, some moisture, then get it to ferment in 1 month. Then you
During the rainy season, it might be difficult to put up the hay, but putting in silage is not a problem.
Absolutely, that's right.
And I'd guess that this is not a widespread technique in Burkina Faso.
Not at this moment. Like I said, you need a lot of investment. I mean, it doesn't seem like much, but it's a lot of work, and you need a lot of hands to do this. And unless you're talking to a large group of producers who would get together and do this kind of stuff, it's very difficult.
We are amazed to see the sheep here have hair rather than wool. And for this group from Georgia, America's leading poultry producer, it's somewhat surprising to find that poultry production is virtually non-existent in Burkina Faso. These poultry houses at the Gampela Experiment Station were built to investigate the poultry industry for Burkina Faso. However, what they found is that it probably won't catch on. because these birds compete for the same food that humans do.
This is typical to the way they would operate at a farm.
Right. Yeah.
They would run outside like this, and what would they eat? Table scraps and anything they can find themselves
right.
Anywhere in the area around the house.
Yeah.
What we try to do here is find some substitutes. What we're using now is brewer's grain. We also used stuff from the rumen of cattle, and one time we used some seeds from wild plants here. And what we are able to achieve is to replace at least part of the diet with the stuff that we can find locally and that are not competitive.
Cattle production also faces difficulty obtaining adequate feed. During the dry season, there is little vegetation for cattle to feed upon, and what is present is so tough that it can't be easily chewed and must be ground before feeding. The work of Ame Nianogo and his colleagues here at Gampela is vitally important, as only native cattle can survive the arid climate. But they are beset with problems, such as late sexual maturation, low weight and coarseness of meat texture due to low fat content, all of which the Georgia-trained researchers are trying to overcome. Similar problems face pig production. Pork is more expensive in Burkina Faso than chicken, fish, or red meat, and pork also competes for the grain humans need for food. Some religious groups here, in particular the Muslims, do not eat pork, but researcher Pierre Paulo believes there is a market to be targeted, the 30% of the population who are Catholics who will eat pork.
Religious groups are having an impact in Burkina Faso, primarily in terms of relief projects, rather than converting souls to Christianity. One of the primary missionary groups here is the Assemblies of God, to whom these particular singers belong. The Southern Baptist Mission Board has an office in downtown Ouagadougou and missionaries scattered at outposts throughout the country. And we have seen how the U.S. Catholic Relief Services provide loans for projects such as this granary and this small mill. The United Methodist Church provided funds to build the main well in Boussay. But total American aid to Burkina Faso ranks well down the list of groups providing assistance in this impoverished nation. Leading the list is France, the former colonial power here, followed by West Germany, Holland, Canada, and Italy. The European Economic Community, the World Bank, and the United Nations all exceed total U.S. programs here, says the American ambassador to Burkina Faso, David Shin.
The total annual program is about $10 million a year.
Shin, who since our visit has been transferred to a stateside diplomatic post, said Burkina Faso has not experienced the devastating starvation of Ethiopia and other African nations, but the continuing desertification keeps the population on the very margin of existence. That means the work of individuals like Ame Nianogo and other UGA grads is vitally important to the nation, and long-term programs of educational assistance are a high priority.
But in the final analysis, it's agriculture. And if your weather isn't cooperating with you, and if the desert is moving south, your future cannot be horribly bright if agriculture is the name of the game.
The battles of Burkina Faso cannot be won with short-lived aid programs from the United States or other countries. In reality, those programs probably do more harm than good. You're looking at an example of aid gone sour. These Jeep vehicles were donated to the University of Ouagadougou under a program sponsored by the U.S. Agency for International Development. Unfortunately, when those funds ran out, there was no money left for maintenance or gasoline, so the trucks sit idle. Diplomats and natives alike say only long-standing assistance programs targeting self-sufficiency through education can offer the aid Burkina Faso so desperately needs.
The level of frustration is certainly diminished when you can see things working.
If the University of Georgia delegation learned one single lesson on this journey, it was that programs must be self-sustaining.
And I think that in the future we've got to make sure that whatever kind of program we bring in, that when we leave, the people here have to be able to carry on those programs.
And that's so much better than us coming in as experts and outlining in 3 days what needs to be done and then heading back home
to hope that changes will come about.
I think the solution for Burkina Faso is to increase the collaboration, the partnerships that have evolved.
When you have young leaders with vision who are being positioned so that they can make decisions which will impact on many people, you know that that has to be the most important thing that's going to happen in this country.
Many of the steps of progress taken here in Burkina Faso are directly and indirectly attributable to the efforts of Dr. Darrell Snyder. He echoes the sentiment that true economic and humanitarian aid must come over time, with relationships built on trust and caring.
In fact, those of us who come into a country like this with the attitude that we have all the answers and they must do it as we say they must do it, are in for a rude awakening, because that is not the way to go about development activity in any country, not even in our own.
Over the last 14 years, Darrell has come to know these students, now leaders in their own right, as family. People like Aimé Nianogo and Pierre Palo and Moussine Nakro. He has seen them grow from naive foreign exchange students in Athens into mature, responsible adults, leaders in their nation, and fully cognizant of the magnitude of the task before them.
I have a family that is as close to me as my own family at home. The children, Florence and I look upon as our grandchildren. And all of these people are very dear.
Snyder agrees the final goal of healthful self-sufficiency for the people of Burkina Faso is somewhere over the horizon of time, perhaps generations in the future. But Dr. Snyder respectfully disagrees that it will take that long to see any concrete results.
And they're showing in people like Aimé and Idrissa and de Talamain and all of the rest of them, because they have come back, they've come back here to their institution with a real dedication, with a real spirit of commitment. They don't want to go to someplace else in the world to live. They want to live here and build here. And already, I think there's evidence of the influence of those young men.
There have been many positive outgrowths of the UGA-Ouagadougou Agreement, the Sister Cities, a peanut research program, hundreds of textbooks donated for Burkina libraries and schools, collaborative research to improve food production. However, the most significant outcome may be the University of Georgia's investment in the people of Burkina. The return to their native land by UGA alumni such as Nakro and Nianogo is the ultimate sustainable program for Burkina's future. And for Burkinabe, such as Big Jean Redrago, it gives him hope for his native country and for his home village of Boussay.
I tend to return to this society to live with people because I love them and I know them, and many of them I have lived and grew up with many of them. I have a plan. When I'll be retired, I'll come back and help sensibilization, help information, and bring technology and help people organize themselves to fight against the drought.
Generation, it will take generations to do that.
the negatives. As the governor said, as Commissioner Irvin said, yes, 300,000 acres is a lot, but that, of course, is not the entire agricultural output. Can you foresee at this point that there would be any increases in the marketplace at supermarkets for produce because of what has happened during the last week?
I don't see it really. We get a lot of our supermarket vegetables and crops and commodities from California, from the Midwest anyway. So this flood has been pretty localized to that area. Although it's devastating to that area, it may not have such a big impact on a state as big as Georgia.
Also, the state has been in something of an economic recovery as of late after going through some kind of lean periods. Is that stronger physical structure going to help the rebounding and the rebuilding in southern Georgia?
Right, it will be. And, of course, Atlanta helps to lead that as well. See, Georgia is one of the fastest growing states in the United States, so we've got a real well-diversified economy. And then all those new people moving in here, they also, in turn, create job opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much, Doug Bagtel from the University of Georgia, our rural sociologist commenting on the economic rebounds and the problems there. Now, Pam has two guests who are going to address additional economic concerns. Pam?
Thank you, Gerald. There have been so many questions about flood insurance during the last week. We have invited two people who can answer some of those questions. Kevin Curtin is the Director of Communications for the State Insurance Commission. He's on my immediate right. And Bill Davis is the Executive Director of the Georgia Insurance Information Service. He's here representing the insurance community. Can you tell me, Bill, why is it people up in the northern part of Georgia may look at these pictures on TV and say, why didn't those people have flood insurance? You know their situation down there. Can you explain that?
Very few had flood insurance. These are not flood-prone areas. This is a 1 in 500-year event. We've already heard that mentioned tonight. So most people were not even aware that they should have this because it was such an outside chance that they would ever have a loss. But between this flood and the floods in the Midwest with the Mississippi River last year, the awareness of the need for flood insurance, which is a federal-funded program or federal-operated program, has been elevated to a new high, and people are beginning to understand what flood insurance is.
Kevin, can anyone get flood insurance, and should we all have it?
Yeah, anybody can. If you're in a floodplain, if you're not in a floodplain, it's available to everybody. You simply have to sign up, pay your premium, you have a 5-day waiting period, and you'll be covered. That's simply how the flood insurance program works. It was created in 1968 to provide for events such as this. Of course, nobody can foresee these kind of events, but that's why the program was created.
How many people in Georgia have flood insurance?
There's approximately 32,000 policies in force in Georgia. Unfortunately, only about 2,500 of those are in the area that we're talking about that got flooded this week.
So what can those people do? Does their normal insurance cover, let me ask you, Bill, does their normal insurance cover anything to do with this flooding?
Homeowners' policies do not cover flooding. There are some coverages for flood in the mobile home policies or policies on trailers because the companies know that those sorts of things tend to happen to mobile homes. And there is coverage for vehicles. Automobile insurance policies have two sections, collision and comprehensive coverages. Most people carry both of those. Collision is if you're in an accident. Comprehensive coverage is for everything else, tree falling on the car being stolen, and flooding of the vehicle. So people whose vehicles have been flooded, they have the comprehensive coverage under their auto insurance policy, and most do. They will be covered. So there's some good news here, but the bad news is that it's not covered under homeowners' policies, so most people are not covered.
What about personal possessions? I mean, we've had those heart-wrenching pictures of everybody going into their houses, trying to grab a few things, get their most precious possessions out. Do they have any hope of recovering anything on that?
If it's damaged by the flood or the rising water, it would not be. It has to be covered under flood insurance policies. Flood insurance policies protect the building, the residence or structure, and you can, a certain amount of coverage is provided under that policy for your possessions. So the answer is no if the possessions were damaged or washed away by the flood.
Sometimes a disaster like this, Kevin, changes the way we do business. It changes the way we look at life. A lot of different things happen. Can you see a change in our reaction toward insurance in this state?
We can. We've already been thinking of ways to heighten the awareness of flood insurance in the state so this never happens to anybody again. One of the ideas that we're kicking around in our office right now is having a mandatory checkoff to make sure everyone is offered flood insurance when they buy their homeowner's policy, to make sure that they know that it's not covered under their homeowner's policy and know that they have the availability of having that coverage. We think that way people would be aware of the fact that it's not covered currently and they can go ahead and cover themselves.
Phil, is flood insurance, generally speaking, affordable, or is this something that people, the average people, are going to have to really scrape together some money to get?
No, it's not as expensive as your homeowner's policy, but if you live in a flood-prone area, the more you live in if you live in those areas where the risks are higher, then you're likely to have a higher premium because it's based on the premium is based on the risk. But there is something called a preferred risk policy for people who live in areas that are moderate to low risk for flooding, and these are very inexpensive. They start at around $75 or $80 for a fair amount of coverage and go up to maybe about $185 per year. So it's less than your homeowner's policy. So the answer is, depends on where you live, but in general, it's not as much as your homeowner's policy, and it does give you that added protection, as Kevin was saying.
Well, how do you go about figuring out how vulnerable you are? I mean, most of us, there may be a creek nearby or a river, but you just don't think about it until something like this happens. Bill, what would you suggest that people do in order to competently assess their own risk in the future?
Ask questions. Ask your insurance agent or insurance company representative. Ask your local government officials who are aware of which areas in their counties or cities are flood prone. The whole basis of this flood insurance program, it's set up to help areas where there are flood-prone areas, to encourage the local governments to decrease the risk in those areas through land use planning. So the governments have to meet certain requirements to participate in the flood insurance program, so they know which areas are more flood-prone, and they know who should be having flood insurance, who should buy it, and who are less likely to have a loss from a flood.
Kevin, do you have any worries now about perhaps some unscrupulous people trying to push flood insurance on people who maybe they're sitting on top of the mountain, you know? I mean, maybe they clearly don't need it. Can you give people a sense of how to go about evaluating both their flood risk and the insurance policies that are put before them?
We've already had calls today into our office of people selling flood insurance to people in Bainbridge, which will not be covered no matter when they buy it for this flood, because once the flood is in progress, those coverages are not available for people downstream, per se. So we've already heard reports of people selling this coverage improperly. We also encourage people that if they're worried about any sort of flood, be it a stream, a creek, anything near their house, or they're in a low-lying area, they really need to seriously consider flood insurance.
And how would you tell them to go about evaluating the people that are selling this kind of insurance to them?
Well, it's available through all local insurance agents, and they're not all licensed to sell this product. Well, you really just need to ask yourself the question, am I willing to bear that risk myself, or should I pay the $100, $200, $300 a year and feel more secure? Do I run a risk of being flooded, or will I assume that risk myself?
Bill, what is the risk, do you think, to the companies that were writing flood insurance in this state? What kind of losses are the companies going to see?
Because it's a federal-funded program, the companies that write this, it's underwritten by the federal government, so they will not have the losses.
Okay.
Unlike after Hurricane Andrew and Hurricane Hugo, where there was a lot of wind damage. After Hurricane Andrew, the insurance companies paid out over $15 billion for all of that. This is through the federal program, the federal government program set up by Congress, so the companies will not have the losses. They do help administer the program, and will help get claims adjusters out to the people who do have flood insurance and have suffered a loss, but there will not be any losses that the companies will suffer from this.
We have some 800 numbers now that you can look at on the screen to tell you where to call if you have important insurance questions, and I'm sure that most of your member companies have been dealing with a lot of questions. Is that right, Bill, throughout this last week, people trying to figure out what to do?
Exactly, and this National Insurance Consumer Helpline is sponsored by the insurance industry nationally. There's a group called the Insurance Information Institute that we are affiliated with and work with, use their resources. It's 1-800-942-4242. It's operated from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. There's a brochure called Settling Insurance Claims After Disaster that will be sent to people in single copies if they ask for it. It will help them not only for this disaster, but for any others in the future that they may suffer.
Kevin, you also have a number for people to call in to ask your office questions. Is that right?
If they need any assistance with filing claims, locating their company, I mean, a lot of people's policies are probably not accessible to them anymore. They can give our office a call in Atlanta here, 1-800-656-2298, and we'll be able to help them with locating their company, making sure they get a fair settlement on their claim, and just helping them answer questions.
Bill, for the people who were lucky enough or had the foresight to have flood insurance and can make some kind of collection on the damage that they have, how long do you think it's going to be for them before they get some relief from their policies?
Well, most all of the people we've been talking with here tonight about when is it going to be that we can make an assessment of all the damage, and everyone says it'll be several weeks before the water subsides and we can get in and move around as we would normally. But the adjusters will be getting in there as soon as they can to start helping, so they should go ahead and contact their insurance agent or insurance company representative so that the process can be started. It may be several weeks before all of this goes away enough that we can get around, but we'll do it as fast as we can.
Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And now Gerald and his guest, Ed Figley.
Ed Figley is the program manager for the Safe Dams program. That's part of the Environmental Protection Division of the State Department of Natural Resources. Ed, thanks for joining us. First of all, I think probably a lot of people might not even know that there is a Safe Dams program. What does your office do? What are they responsible for?
Safe Dams Act in Georgia charges our office with inventorying and classifying dams throughout the state and regulating dams that in the event of sudden failure would cause loss of life. They're called Category 1 dams.
Now, you were gracious enough to invite us, or at least allow us to go along yesterday as you did an inspection tour, and at some point here we're going to see some of that footage and you can explain what we're seeing. In talking with your office and talking with others, this was the most devastating event in most people's memories. Why don't you tell us where we are there, if you can identify that location and what was going on.
This is the crest of the dam at Lake Spivey down in Henry County. Of course, from now we're looking at the entrance to the emergency spillways, which are still flowing at Lake Spivey because it has a fairly large drainage basin. And of course, prior night they did have a pretty strong rainstorm there. What we're doing is we're just evaluating how the dam performed during the storm event back on July 5th. And it did what it was supposed to do. It passed the flow through the spillways, didn't damage the dam proper. Of course, we expect during major storms there to be some damage in the emergency spillways. We're not so optimistic as to think that large storms won't damage dams.
Well, exactly, and as a lot of people were saying in talking with your office, the rate of recurrence of an event like this that we've had in the last 7 days is 1 in every 500 years. Is that right? A flood of this severity?
A lot of people have been bandying about that number. I can tell you it's more than the 100-year storm, but exactly what kind of frequency we're looking at depends on us evaluating the rainfall data from the National Weather Service. We looked at areas within the state that are experience 21, 22 inches in 24 hours. Other areas might experience 16. So the rate of frequency varies with location and intensity of rainfall.
Is it too early to assess what you and your office have learned from this incredible last 7 days of record rainfall and rare events like this flood?
I would say that for us, we think that the dams that we regulate performed rather well, given the criteria that we regulate them by. Certainly there's room for improvement. We anticipated some damage. Some of the dams that we do regulate, we had 2 dams that we regulated that did fail, but they didn't cause any loss of life downstream. We were fortunate in that respect, and as far as we know, no one was injured in any of the dams below due to the floods that we're involved with. We have other dams throughout the state that caused road washouts where people drove into them and were injured or died, as a result of driving off in those. And certainly that's something for us to consider in the future. It may take some legislation to adjust the Safe Dams Act to see whether or not those
are to be regulated in the future, that's, of course, a legislative decision. I'm pleased with how we did, but had the storm moved further north in Georgia, we could have been in serious trouble if it had hit the metropolitan Atlanta area.
Well, indeed, and as meteorologist Terry Neese was telling us much earlier in the program, very unusual in that this storm kind of parked over Georgia and just kept circulating and dropping more and more rain, especially on South Georgia. That's all we have time for. Ed Figley, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your telling us about the Safe Dams program. All right, joining us now from the University of Georgia at Athens is Dale Dorman with the Cooperative Extension Program, and she is going to tell us something about flood cleanup. That's something we're going to hear a whole lot about in the next few days and weeks to come. And Dale, if you would, start off by telling us maybe the top 3 things people need to think about and do as they return to their flood-damaged homes.
Well, when your flood victims enter their homes, they're going to be facing an environment that has been contaminated with potentially harmful bacteria and debris. They need to keep this in mind and act accordingly. One of the first things, of course, that they need to do is to put together a first aid kit and have it readily available. And now is a good time to get a tetanus shot. They need to gear up appropriately to enter these homes to clean up. They need to use protective clothing, such as making certain they've got on rubber boots and heavy shoes and long pants, and use rubber gloves. One of the main dangers, though, of entering these homes to begin with is the danger of rodents and snakes that have taken refuge in homes and are looking for food. So people need to be very mindful of the fact that they're there and be very careful where they put their hands and feet. Of course, before you enter your home the first time after the flood, one of the most important things for you to do is to check to be sure that the electrical and gas services have been cut off to that community or subdivision. Then when you get to your own individual home, throw the power and turn off the gas at your own particular location. And that way you will have control over bringing it back on whenever you're ready for it. Of course, you'll need to check the building for sagging ceilings and for jammed doors and for damaged floors and foundations. And whenever you go in to inspect this home, make certain that you do use battery-operated flashlights and lanterns. Do not use anything that has gas or a gas lantern or an oil lantern, because there's a possibility of gas leaks. One of the most important things, though, for people that are living in rural areas is those that have private wells. If you're on a public water system, then the authorities will tell you when it's safe for you to begin drinking your water. If you have a private well, you and you alone are responsible for inspecting that well for contamination. Under the present conditions that we've had, you must have that well shock chlorinated and tested for bacteria before you use it for drinking purposes. Until you do have that done, you need to make certain that you boil the water at least 10 minutes before you drinking it, or either you may want to use a solution of 1/2 teaspoon of unscented chlorine liquid laundry bleach in your water. Use that to 1 gallon of water, and that would purify it for drinking purposes.
Dale, I'm not sure that everyone is prepared for what they're going to see when they go back in their homes. I have covered floods in other areas of the country. Floodwaters leave an enormous amount of refuge and dirt in those houses, yes. Very much different than what a tornado or a hurricane would, where there's a lot of damage but not so much dirt. What about the process of trying to clean up their homes? If you have carpeting, if you have hardwood floors, for instance, how would you go about sanitizing your home and saving that carpeting?
Well, that is one of the most important things that we're going to be facing, and that is how to sanitize these homes, because they've been covered with debris, sewage, dead animal carcasses. All manner of evil has been in this water. And to protect yourself from microorganisms, you must sanitize. Now, one of the most important things that you need to remember about sanitizing is that there are a number of different sanitizers. There are a number of disinfectants on the market commercially. One of the most important ones and the most often used is, of course, just household laundry bleach. But there are different strengths of laundry bleach out there on the market. So when consumers go to make their purchase, they do need to look at that label and make certain that they are selecting a product that has at least 5.25% strength of sodium hypochlorite as the active ingredient. Your non-chlorine bleaches cannot be used as a substitute, and they will just simply need to follow the directions on the container with respect to the amount of chlorine that they would use to a gallon of water for sanitizing purposes.
Okay, Dale, thank you very much. We are running out of time here. Some very important tips on sanitizing your home, what to expect when you go back from a flood. We also want to remind the people, for more information, contact their county extension service office. There are different numbers all around the state, so what you need to do is look in a phone book under the county government section for County Extension Service Office, and you will find that number there. Right now, after thanking Dale, we've got some more tips about flood cleanup and repair with Pam Martin and our next guest. Pam?
Gerald, that guest is Barry Reed, the administrator of the Governor's Office for Consumer Affairs. I hate to say it, but we've already got sharks in the water, don't we, when it comes to rip-off artists? They're already circulating in our state.
Already, the Office of Consumer Affairs employees that are out in the disaster assistance centers are reporting to me that victims are being marketed by questionable home repair outfits. We're concerned that Georgia not be a repeat performance of what happened in South Carolina with Hugo and Florida with Andrew. We want to get the word out to those folks in the flood areas to check very carefully before agreeing to have any work done by a home repair facility. We've set up a hotline. You contact if they'll contact one of our officials in the assistance centers, we'll get them information on the reputability of the individuals they're about to do business with. We'll check them out. We'll do everything we can to protect our people down there from further tragedy, Pam. It does no good to pay $2,000 or $3,000 because you're feeling the pressure to get that hole in the roof or whatever it might be repaired, and only to look up and see that pickup truck driving down the street with your money and the work undone.
Paint me a picture of what people say to get to someone who's suffered one of these devastating losses. What kind of a pitch do they use, and how do you spot them?
Sometimes they tailor the pitch to make the homeowner believe that they're experienced in working with the aftermath of disasters, when in fact they're nothing more than a fly-by-nighter outfit who's driving through with very little material. Sometimes they'll say, Pam, we'll do a top-grade job for you. We'll put #1 material in your home, only to learn later that they've used materials that are either defective or inferior, and that, of course, is theft by deception. The governor is very concerned. He's asked us to put together, and we have a task force, a law enforcement task force. We want to get the word out. If you're not a legitimate home repair facility, you do not want to come to Georgia, because you're very likely to wind up behind bars. We're going to work with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and any time we suspect that the activity is criminal, and we'll be working day by day with GBI. We're going to turn it over to their criminal investigators, and they're going to be out there in the field with us, and you'll probably be seeing some arrests down the road. We're also, Pam, getting some reports now of overcharging, unconscionable overcharging for what we consider life necessity items: food, milk, bread. I could go on with the things that we're hearing, motel rooms. We're asking merchants at this time, please try to hold the line. We know you will experience some additional cost of your own. We expect you to recapture those, but this is no time to be profiteering. These people are devastated, and they need all the help we can provide, and a fair price is certainly some help that we can give at this point in time. Again, if you have any questions about the operation, the repair facility, or charities, I want to mention very quickly that one of the things in other states, right after the charity is over, we see people knocking on doors. We heard tonight from the Red Cross saying they don't knock on doors. You're going to be solicited. There is a way to check on charitable solicitations, and we will have that information at the disaster assistance centers. You can call our office. The Secretary of State's office also keeps a list of all registered charities. There is a way to check before giving. Everybody wants to help, but the worst thing that can happen now is to have some of these, and I consider them the most vicious kind of consumer scams, Pam, that we know about. They prey upon people at a time really of tragedy. And we're going to do everything we can to make it clear, if you're a con artist, you're not welcome in Georgia, especially right now.
How big a problem do you think we have right now?
Basically, it's very early. We're told by the other states, again, that have experienced the disasters, that once the drying out period occurs, that's when the influx of home repair operations start setting up. we're hoping that we'll get mostly legitimate people in here, all legitimate people in here to work with these people, I should say, and that we won't have a serious problem. But the homeowners themselves can do a lot to prevent this from happening by being very careful and checking out and getting detailed information on these operators before they sign up to do business with them.
Well, let's give them some more information about how to check somebody out and how to check out a contract. What do you want them to know? How to evaluate someone?
Basically, get as much identifying detail as you can on the business itself. Then check with your local Better Business Bureau. Do a rep check, as we call it, a reputability check with them. Talk to the officials that our office is putting into the disaster assistance centers. We've got a hotline set up to our computer in Atlanta here, Pam, that keeps up with the reputability and reliability of businesses based on the number of complaints and how they've been resolved. They can work with us to get information. The other things you want to do are simply find out if you've done work in this area before, and if so, could I talk to some of your previous customers? The worst thing you can do is to be in a rush at this period of time. And it's going to be so hard to be patient because some of these people have very severe problems to be repaired in order to make the home habitable again. But we urge you, don't rush in. And the little saying we're using is check before you write a check.
And briefly, very briefly, you talked about overpricing, price gouging.
Yeah.
Who's going to make the determination? For all those merchants out there, who's going to be watching them?
Well, the law that my office enforces, the Governor's Office of Consumer Affairs enforces, the Fair Business Practices Act, provides that the administrator shall determine what acts, in fact, are unfair in the conduct of consumer transactions. I'm going to take a very dim view of excessive or unconscionable overcharges on what I consider to be life necessity items, food, milk, bread. I heard today of a 200 and some % increase in the cost of charcoal. We don't think about charcoal as being a life necessity item, but at this period of time in Southwest Georgia, it may well be such.
The only way they can cook. Thank you very much, Barry Weed, for joining us. Now we have some real legitimate telephone numbers to give you related to the flood relief efforts, and we'll be back with more Flood of 94 coverage after this.
And we return now to the University of Georgia at Athens, where Henry Logan, director of the Small Business Development Center, is standing by. Mr. Logan, we want to do some more assessment of the economic impact of the flood of '94 on the state of Georgia, especially on those areas so badly hit. Is it too early to give an accurate assessment of what the impact is on small businesses in South Central and Southwestern Georgia?
Gerald, I think it's quite premature to give an assessment of exactly what the impact is. We know it's going to be substantial. I think, according to the American Business Directories, in the areas that are affected, there'll be some 20,600 service and retail and manufacturing businesses in that area, so we expect it to be substantial.
Also, I've been looking at stories and reading different accounts, people are talking about, yes, there is going to be some government money available, but in many cases, or in most cases, it's going to be loans. And established business people are saying, I don't want to take out a $200,000 loan at my stage in life or business. What kind of relief is going to be available in the way of loans through the SBA, through emergency relief from the federal government?
Well, and I'm quite pleased to have the opportunity to talk about that a little bit right now, to let the small business owners in the affected areas know that there is help available. Two primary loans will be available to small business owners in the areas that are declared disaster areas. And they are the Physical Disaster Business Loan, which will provide capital to repair and replace real property, machinery, fixtures, inventory, and leasehold improvements to their pre-disaster condition. And also the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which will provide working capital to allow the small business to meet the financial obligations which it could have met had the disaster not occurred.
We are looking now at some of the footage from around the state of different areas that have been affected by that. And I understand also, Mr. Logan, that there are some telephone numbers available for people in different areas of the state where they can avail themselves of this relief money.
Yes, Gerald. The University of Georgia Small Business Development Center is making efforts to increase our service in the affected areas. We have existing offices in Albany, Macon, and Warner Robins, which we're going to shift some staff around to increase our technical assistance in those offices. Also, the Georgia Power Company in both Americus and Bainbridge have given us office space so we can locate consultants in those two cities, and we plan to locate in the Hawkinsville-Pulaski Chamber of Commerce facility.
Many of our guests tonight and many of the individuals we've had on this evening have talked about people helping people. In addition to government assistance, what other types of assistance might small businessmen, small businesswomen expect from their counterparts or other business people in the state not affected by the tragedy?
Well, it's been quite uplifting at the SBDC this week. We've had calls from accountants, bankers, students, all volunteering. It's when a small business person that's been devastated by the flooding, it's hard enough to manage his day-to-day operation or her day-to-day operation, but under these conditions, it's almost impossible. So they need assistance, and we feel like that with the volunteers that we have and with some training in our consultants, that we can provide that, particularly with these loan packages. They're not as difficult as they may first appear to be under the duress that the business owners are under at the present time, but assistance can certainly make the task much easier.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Henry Logan, Director of the Small Business Development Center at the University of Georgia. And right now, Pam is standing by with another guest, Dr. Betsy Gard.
Thank you, Gerald. Dr. Gard is the coordinator of the State of Georgia Response Team and the APA Disaster Response Network. The team supports the Red Cross staff and flood survivors by providing crisis counseling. Most of these people have not even seen the worst of it, sad to say, yet. They're out of their homes, but they haven't really been back to see how little is left them. What kind of attitude is best or healthiest for them to take when they see, in some cases, their whole life's work wiped away?
Well, in a sense, I think survivors go through a process of grieving. They go through first a stage of shock, and then denial, and then in some cases anger, and then finally a type of resolution. I think that understanding that this is a process that takes time, that healing takes time, and that they need to be patient with themselves, with their neighbors, with governmental agencies, and that resolution will come.
We had Tony Dorsey on earlier in this program at a shelter in Albany, and it was flooded with children, as you might expect. There were children everywhere. Now, a disaster like this is tough enough if you're an adult and you can figure out some of it, but what can parents tell their children to try and help them through something like this?
Well, I think it's very important to emphasize to children that they are safe, and that everyone's going to be working together to put lives back together again. I think that children sometimes show some regression. Children may show behaviors that were typical of them at younger ages, and parents need to be understanding of that and accepting of that. I think that it's important to get structure and routines back into the family's life as much as possible, to go back to regular meal times, regular bed times. I think everyone needs to alternate time for work and for recreation. People are going to be working in the heat. They need to be sure they take adequate rest, that people get enough hydration and fluids, and that people take care of themselves both physically and emotionally during these times.
What is your network going to be able to do for these victims?
Okay, well, we're going in, we're being involved in the shelters. We are supporting the staff in the shelters, and we're also supporting the survivors. We will be counseling people on the kinds of things they can do psychologically to help themselves and help their families, and help each other and help neighbors. We're there to listen. That's a very important part of this. You know, people need a chance to talk. People need to avail themselves of talking. That's a great way to feel better, is to talk about what you've been going through, what you're feeling. We also try to help people understand stages and what they can expect they might be feeling as they go through the process of resolution and getting through this.
You've seen other disasters. We've had a bunch of them in Georgia here. How are we doing in this one?
It's really too early to tell right now. We're still in that kind of shock stage, that heroic stage. It's difficult for us to know at this point how things are shaping up, how much damage there's been, how quickly things can return to the pre-flood stages. So it's really a little too early for us to tell.
We will hope for the best. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Gard. And right now we have some phone numbers for you to see. First, disaster relief information.
Well, we've got a lot of people to thank before we say goodnight. You'll see them all in the upcoming credits. Special thanks to Pam Martin for her appearance tonight, and for WSB, your station in Atlanta, for providing those live reports from Bainbridge and from Albany.
WSB TV has a special Flood of 94 report tomorrow at 8 p.m. And we'll have the very latest news and information for you then. Georgia Public Television also wants to thank WGNX for their help in providing videotape. And WMAZ TV, Eyewitness News, gave us our Macon update.
And Channel 36 also assisted. We got some footage from WXIA Channel 11 as well. And Friday at noon, Peach State Public Radio will have a special call-in program to answer more of your questions about the flood. Maybe I'll talk to some of you then. For Georgia Public Television, I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Pam Martin. We close with more scenes from the Flood of 94. Good night.
Good night.
Watching member-supported Georgia Public Television, GPTV, bringing you the best.
For thousands of years, the rise and fall of nations has depended on controlling the commerce crossing the world's oceans. Interrupt the flow of sea power and the modern world ceases to function. The oceans hold promises of riches, knowledge, resources, and power. Now comes compelling insight into our ageless quest for mastery of the oceans. I'm Leonard Nimoy, and this is the story of sea power.
Member-supported GPTV thanks the following for their investment in quality television.
After 15 years, we're scrapping the old Saab 900 and replacing it with a car totally re-engineered for enhanced safety and performance. Announcing the rebirth of the Saab 900.
The Morris Museum of Art, located on the scenic Riverwalk corridor in Augusta, preserving and enhancing a cultural legacy with a diverse collection of historic and contemporary Southern art.
Going to be the ballot or the bullet, by any means necessary.
Do you consider yourself militant?
I consider myself Malcolm.
Malcolm X, Make It Plain. A special presentation of the American experience.
We're bringing you the best specials on GPTV.
We all know life can be a little
unusual, a little exciting,
Taking the dust of this crummy little town off my feet, and I'm going to see the world.
a little romantic.
Golly.
Life can be a lot of things, but for James Stewart, it's nothing less than wonderful. Join host Johnny Carson saluting an American movie legend.
You've been waiting years for this encore, and now they're back in a reunion concert from Los Angeles. Carreras, Domingo, Pavarotti, with Mehta, the three tenors in concert 1994, here on public television.
We've got variety on GPTV. First at 7:30, don't miss Victory at Sea with Guadalcanal. Then at 8, a very special I'll Fly Away with Then and Now. And at 9:45, catch this critically acclaimed